This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcasting Network. I am your host, Josh Strickland, here on this Easter Sunday. It is Easter Sunday. I completely forgot. It is Easter Sunday. It's kind of difficult to keep up with holidays and days in general these days. Just saying the word days multiple times makes me extremely happy. But anyways, we have a jam-packed show for you here tonight, whatever. I am back in my cubicle, small box, so I apologize for any echoes or anything like that. It will also be like this for the Tuesday show because I will also be recording at work for the Tuesday edition of the show, so I apologize for today and Tuesday if there's any issues. Last week it didn't seem that bad, but here are the topics for the day. We got a pro day. We're going to discuss that as he did a pro day. We'll talk about the Brandon Cooks trade that the Texans traded for Brandon Cooks. We'll talk about the MLB proposing a realignment just for 2020 to try to get this season off the ground. And then, of course, the MLB show, the tournament, that is kind of getting some steam, and they've already started so far, I believe. And then we'll, of course, go into movies 49 through 40 and the top 100 sports movies. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to start this off with UFC 249. UFC 249. Getting canceled, and this story has just been crazy to follow. So I remember earlier last week, I remember hearing that Dana White was saying, look, we're going to fight. Dana White saying, look, we're going to fight. We have the means. We have the fighters. We are going to fight. No matter what happens, no matter if we have to go get an island or something like that, get a fight island and build a makeshift octagon in there and do crazy things like this. Dana White refuses to let the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, global pandemic, may I remind you, he refuses to let this global pandemic, this public health crisis, get in the way of his UFC. He's refusing it. So, it's just been interesting. Dana White versus pandemic. I mean, it's almost as interesting as any of the UFC fights that he could have actually gotten done. So UFC 249, they were planning on having it despite this public health crisis. I think UFC is the only professional sports league in general that hasn't canceled, completely suspended everything before this happened. But he told Dana White said a month ago, he told TSN after UFC 248 in Las Vegas that he didn't give a about the coronavirus. So he's not letting the coronavirus get in the way of this. On Thursday, 2 days after triumphantly announcing that plans were in place for a series of UFC fights starting April 18th, Disney and ESPN decided to shut that down. So Dana White told ESPN's Brett Okamoto, this whole thing has been a battle since day one. We have been fighting nonstop all day and all night since this pandemic started to put on this event on April 18th. Today we got a call from the highest level you can go at Disney and the highest level of ESPN telling him to shut it down. We have to shut it down. Because first off, it's a bad look for us, Disney and ESPN. I say us, hypothetically, I am not part of either of those things. But it is also a bad look for the UFC in general. But I mean, I feel like the UFC doesn't care about their look I don't think they've cared. I mean, I think they heavily care about their look, actually, because they want to separate themselves from the WWE and stuff like that. But the UFC, they care about their look. But on the same vein as that, they also don't care, because that's kind of their look. Their look is kind of not caring at the same time caring. It's complicated. I complicated the whole situation by myself. But Dana White proclaimed his intention to use 2 sites, a California tribal land and an undisclosed private island, as staging grounds for MMA competitions, quickly brought this feckless and unneeded emotional roller coaster ride to an end. White, he healed to his broadcast partners on the same day. California Senator Dianne Feinstein released a statement calling for cancellation of the fights that were earmarked for Tachi Yakut tribal land in the state's fertile Central Valley. The UFC president, Dana White, proudly boasted he won't take no for an answer, still insisting that the fights go on. So, all events are subject to change in the UFC, of course. This one changed again and again and again and again, but White acknowledged that trying to promote in the midst of a pandemic is the most difficult challenge of his career, which, I mean, duh. Like, what are we trying to do here? Dana White, he said, I don't crack to that stuff regarding the criticism he's faced. But that doesn't mean that other people won't crack to it. He mentions that he could still go Saturday. ESPN, I'm sure, would let me do it on Fight Pass, but ESPN doesn't want me to do it. So we're basically in the situation where the UFC kind of has to stop, because the main people funding the UFC right now, Disney and ESPN, are saying, no, we're not doing this, you're kind of crazy. But in the eyes of the world, the eyes of the world are on the UFC right now, because they're the only sports league attempting to do something before like May 21st. The only one. Golf, they pushed everything back. Baseball, they're trying to figure out how to come back, but they don't know when they're going to be able to come back. Basketball, who knows? Football, up in the air. UFC is the only one. I mean, WWE, I guess, but WWE, they just had WrestleMania. They canceled their Money in the Bank pay-per-view because, I mean, some of this stuff, because first off, their wrestlers are refusing to come, and then also, I mean, I think Monday Night Raw, they only had like a very small amount of actual wrestlers on the show. They had like a 30-minute long match between a couple people, like Apollo Crews, which I know of him, but like what is he doing having a 30-minute long match on Monday Night Raw? But anyways, this is in Dana White's DNA, and at the end of the day, it kind of gets what Dana White wants. It gives UFC more exposure, which is exactly what he wants. He wants UFC to get more exposure, but UFC 249 is on hold. All UFC fights are on hold for now. But White keeps doubling down. He says, I can go next week, so whenever my partner gives me the thumbs up and they're ready to go, I'm ready to go. He keeps saying that he wants to be the first professional league to come back after this whole coronavirus thing is over. He keeps saying that. He wants to be the first one back. The first card he promised would be the first post-pandemic sporting event, and it would take place on the tribal lands that were ready to bail him out on the 18th. The island location where non-US based fighters can compete should be completed in a month. So they're still building this fight island. They're still building this fight island for some reason, and the UFC can go about fulfilling its slate of 42 events for ESPN and generating the revenue its ownership groups may desperately need. The only timetable that means anything now is the one that should have mattered most throughout this whole deal, which is whenever it is safe, which is what most leagues are doing. So, this is so perfectly UFC. This entire situation perfectly encapsulates Dana White and the UFC in general, where they just want to get the most amount of exposure possible, and Dana White is itching to get something out there, some kind of fight or anything out there right now, because being the only sporting event on, that's exactly what Dana White wants. And it is killing him that he's not able to do it because of ESPN, because of Disney and stuff like that. It is killing him on the inside how he is not able to be the only thing on, being the only sporting event that everyone would have to buy into, because it would be a pay-per-view and it'll still be $60. But that's what he wants, and he's killing him. He's building a fight island because of it, and it is absurd, in my opinion. But when we return, we'll talk about Tua Tagovailoa. He had his pro day. He had a virtual pro day, and we'll discuss more about that when we return.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, Tua Tagovailoa, he had a virtual pro day, which, of all people that needed a pro day, needed to prove himself, because he did not perform at the NFL Combine. All he did at the Combine was do physicals and get looked at by different teams, and that turned out to be bad. 2 teams red flagged him for not even his hip, just for he's had wrist, he's had ankle injuries as well, but 2 teams red flagged him for medical reasons at the Combine. So this pro day was this virtual pro day was the biggest thing that Tua could have done. He kind of had to do it if he wanted to prove that he could be in. I mean, you could argue that the Dolphins or the Chargers were already hell-bent on drafting him. You could say that, I guess. But there's nothing certain. 2 teams have red flagged him. I can't mention that enough. 2 teams have red flagged him. But the arrow is pointing up again. He had his virtual pro day, and like I said, he is the person that benefits the most from having a pro day, because he is easily a top 5 quarterback if he is healthy and if teams actually take a chance on him. He's a fantastic talent. So he worked out for an hour at an undisclosed location in Nashville. It was obviously like a D1 or something like that, some training thing. But he had 55 scripted throws, another 20 throws in a dynamic drill setting that tried to mimic a traditional pro day setting. There were fewer than 10 people present for the workout, and the health and safety guidelines set forth during the COVID-19 pandemic were practiced. So Steinberg said that his health is fine. He told the Associated Press on Thursday there's 2 doctors that have seen him, Dr. Lyle Kane, which is Alabama's orthopedic surgeon, and Dr. Chip Rout, who performed the surgery. Both have said that he is healthy, he'll be lively and ready to go for training camp, and the likelihood of reoccurrence is very low. So he was cleared to run and begin football activities once again on March 9th, just shy of 4 months after dislocating his hip and fracturing his posterior hip wall in a game against Mississippi State. He's been training with Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer has high praises for him, saying he is a Hall of Famer already. I mean, high praises. Like Trent Dilfer is overselling the crap out of him. I just gotta say, I really like Tua as well. I think Tua's fantastic, but Trent Dilfer is kind of going a little overboard, in my opinion. But anyways, but he said Trent Dilfer said Tua throws better than Aaron Rodgers and Dan Marino, which okay. Ken Wisenhunt, which is a former NFL head coach, former offensive coordinator, he said he was impressed with his feel for the game and his knowledge of the game, how he processes and what he's able to recall. That is one of the big things you look for. Physically, he looked ready, which is the main thing that people are thinking of. So, obviously, before last year, Tua was the number 1 overall pick. Joe Burrow kind of came out of there, and then, of course, Tua had the fractured hip. I think I mentioned after Tua declared for the draft, I think I mentioned then, that was back in January, which is forever ago at this point, but I mentioned back then that Joe Burrow will get drafted number 1 overall, but I think Tua is the better quarterback if Tua's medical records, hold up. So, Michael Lombardi, he had an athletic column, he's saying that 2 teams red flagged Tua. He mentioned that it's not just his hip, it's his ankle, it's his wrist. He broke his wrist the first day of spring ball one year. He said he's brittle, you can't deny it. 2 teams that I've talked to have flunked him. They flunked him on not just the hip, but on a multitude of injuries. The risk far outweighs the reward. So, 2 teams, who cares? Those 2 teams could have been the Chiefs. It could have been anybody. I don't know who they were. I'm sure that knowledge is out there somewhere. But they're probably teams that probably already have quarterbacks, and they're not too keen on drafting Tua that high. You know who is keen on it? The Dolphins and the Chargers. They pick 5th and 6th. Both have a need for a young franchise quarterback. You have Tua, you have Justin Herbert. Those are going to be the 2 that are available. There's a lot of momentum for Josh Hart as well, but I don't know about that. But Chris Mortensen actually posted some of Tua's pro day footage, and I watched it a little bit, and I'm going to be honest with you. Trent Dilfer needs to calm down when it comes to evaluating Tua here. So he moves great. He's moving great. He's moving unlike someone who just had hip surgery 4 months ago. He is moving pretty well. His footwork looks great. I'm watching it right now. His footwork looks great. His hip movement looks perfectly fine. It doesn't look like the hips are going to be an issue here. His throwing, it's above average, but it's not amazing. It's not Aaron Rodgers or Dan Marino amazing, but this pro day footage will be beneficial for Tua to, get drafted high, get drafted where he wants to be drafted. But, looking at the pro day footage, of course, NFL scouts probably have more of a body of reference than I do. But just looking at this footage right now, he looks pretty good. It's just going to see if the Dolphins or the Chargers are willing to bet on him. That's kind of where we're at. I really think Tua can be a fantastic quarterback in the NFL. The issue is his medicals. That is the issue. You can't deny he got red flagged. Can't deny it. That is something you can't just gloss over. You can't be red flagged by 2 teams, completely flunked 2 teams' medical reports, and that not be an important thing. Reports are saying that he's taken that in stride, though, and stuff like that. He said Passes, who's been working with quarterback, he's like Tua's high school coach or something like that. He's been working with quarterbacks for 44 years. He could tell Tua was special back when he first showed up at QB camp on his own, with his own ball at the age of 9. He mentions that Tua has this God-given talent to be super accurate. He spins it like few people ever have. And then you combine that with his competitive spirit. I can't even imagine how much better he will get as he develops more. He is really something special, and he's pushing even harder now after being on the verge of losing it. There are guys who want to win, and there are guys who want to go undefeated, which, of course, you can't go undefeated in the NFL. That's absurd. But, listen, I think Tua can be really good in the league. But you know who's not going to be... You know what's going to happen, though? He's going to be a fluke. Because here's what's going to happen. He's going to get drafted by either the Dolphins, which the Dolphins are on the up and up, but overall the Dolphins organization has not been great since Dan Marino left. Overall. Or he's going to go to the Chargers, which is another organization where they had Phillip Rivers for 15 years, and they couldn't make it to a Super Bowl. You see where I'm going here. I feel like Tua can be great if given the right situation, which, I mean, you can say that about literally any quarterback that gets drafted ever. If you are put in a good situation, you will succeed. There are quarterbacks that succeed despite their situation. Like we're kind of seeing now, Deshaun Watson. I'll bash Bill O'Brien in the next segment, I'm pretty sure. But, so, Tua... He has the potential. The potential is so there, but I don't think he's going to realize that potential because he's not going to play for a team that will help him realize that potential. And it's going to be one of those stories where it's just going to be incredibly, incredibly sad because we're going to look on from this. He was a number one pick beginning of the football season. He was a number one pick. That hip injury, of course, bumped him down to 5 or 6, but that is how good he is. A major hip injury like that would bump so many other quarterbacks pretty much out of the first round. But Tua is so good that he's only going to drop 4 or 5, depending on where he officially gets drafted. Some teams could draft up and get him. So we'll see how that goes. I think he's going to be great. But I don't think the team he's going to be on is going to be great, so he's not going to be able to realize his full potential and actually, be a Hall of Famer like Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer, on the other hand, needs to calm down. When we return, we'll talk about the Brandon Cooks trade, and we'll talk about Bill O'Brien more when we come back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
You really got to feel bad for someone like Brandon Cooks. He's been traded, I think, 3 or 4 times. He's only 26. He's been traded 3 or 4 times. He's had 5 concussions in the 5 or 6 seasons in the league, and it just keeps getting traded. But the good news is people keep valuing him that high to trade for him. He's been traded for 2 first-round picks, both in separate trades, of course. But he's been traded once for a first-round pick. Then he was traded another time for a first-round pick, and now he's being traded to the Houston Texans here. So here's the official trade. Houston Texans, they traded their 57th overall pick, which is their second-round pick here in this draft, for Brandon Cooks and a 4th-round pick in 2022. That's the deal. So, we'll discuss the Rams first, because I'll get in my rant about Bill O'Brien later. We'll discuss the Rams. Why does this make sense for the Rams? Well, this whole offseason for the Rams has been about trying to clean up past mistakes, moving forward with more financial flexibility. They got rid of Clay Matthews, they got rid of Todd Gurley, and here they are trying to get rid of Brandon Cooks, and they were able to get a second-round pick for Cooks, unlike Todd Gurley and Clay Matthews, as they just had to cut those guys. So why are they trying to save so much money? Well, they kind of went all in 2 years ago, and they got so close to winning the Super Bowl. By so close, I mean they didn't score a touchdown, but it was still a close game because nobody really wanted to win that game. But why do they save money? So they paid Jared Goff Jared Goff has cap hits of $36 million and $32.5 million the next 2 seasons. They also paid Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is at $25 million and $27.9 million. And they also have to account for $20 million in dead money for Todd Gurley. They also have Jalen Ramsey, who they kind of have to make him the highest paid quarterback in football because he's just that good. So pretty much where the Rams are right now, they just have so much money in very few players. So they're going to have to rely on a lot of younger guys that are still in their rookie deals and stuff like that. And they also don't have a first-round pick in 2020 or 2021. So this, them getting that second-round pick from the Texans helps them in the draft a little bit because they get another asset here in the draft, but it's still not a first round. So Brandon Cooks, he was due $8 million guaranteed in 2020, and then his salary bumps up to $12 million in 2021. So this trade accomplishes 2 things for the Rams. They move Cook's remaining salary, and they also get more draft capital, as I just mentioned. So the Rams now have 2 second-round picks, 4 selections in the first 3 rounds. None of them are in the first round, but they will try to replenish their roster with rookies and low-cost options, which will help them, hopefully, in the long term. Now, for the Texans. Another puzzling one. Now, I just want to preface this. By itself, this is not a bad trade. This is an okay trade. I mean, yeah, Cooks, he's got, the cap hit's going to be an issue, but, he's a pretty good player. He's a good deep threat. Concussion issue is something you definitely need to look at. He's got a concussion history, which is very unfortunate. But, you traded a second-round pick for this potential deep threat. Last year, he had 42 receptions for 583 yards. He's been traded 3 times. He only had 2 touchdowns. But to put that in perspective, number 2 wide receivers league average last year was 668. So he produced like a below average number 2 receiver in 2019. But this, if you look up the overarching, which is, we have to go back to it, DeAndre Hopkins. They traded DeAndre Hopkins for pennies, pretty much. So here's the overall. Let's look at the 2 deals combined. So basically, the Texans gave up DeAndre Hopkins, a second-round pick, and a 4th-round pick, and they received David Johnson, Brandon Cooks, a second-round pick, which is pick 40. They traded pick 57. They got pick 40, a 2021 4th-round pick, and a 2022 4th-round pick. So if the second-round picks and the 4th-round picks cancel out, they basically swapped DeAndre Hopkins for Johnson, Cooks, and a 2022 4th. So David Johnson had 345 rushing yards last season, and he was untradeable because he's due $10.2 million in 2019. And then Cooks, so let me backtrack here. Bill O'Brien came out and said the reason they traded DeAndre Hopkins is because he wanted a pay raise. He came out and said that. He said DeAndre Hopkins was looking for a pay raise, and we just couldn't do it for him. So let's take that into account. So DeAndre Hopkins, he was, he was making like $12.5 million. He wanted to get paid like $20 million. So, okay. That's fair, I guess. So, David Johnson and Brandon Cooks are due $18.2 million next year. Now, David Johnson, like we've mentioned before, he has not performed like he did in 2016. He has not performed like that since. Then you have Brandon Cooks, who's a pretty good player. He's got concussion history. He's literally like 1 or 2 concussions away from having to retire, and he's also getting paid a lot of money as well. So you're paying those 2 for $18.2 million, or you could have just kept Hopkins and then, give him a pay raise and have the best receiver in the league. It makes very little sense to me. It brings up the fact that Bill O'Brien must have really not liked DeAndre Hopkins. Like, really. Because none of this makes sense to me. It really doesn't. None of this. makes a lot of sense to me. It doesn't. DeAndre Hopkins was the number one receiver, not a number one receiver. He was a top 5 receiver in the league, and you traded him basically for a concussion, a good deep threat with a terrible contract and concussion history, and a running back whose best days are, who's out of his prime already, and he's getting paid a huge contract as well. So I don't really know what Bill O'Brien is thinking, and I really don't know what to make of it. So if you look at this deal in isolation, given the circumstances, the Rams got a good return for Cooks. The Rams are still taking a cap hit of $21.8 million for a player who's not even going to be on the roster, however. They're digging their way out of a massive hole by acquiring draft capital and creating cap space for 2021. But, so they're just trying to dig out of their own hole. Meanwhile, the Texans, this could easily be one of the, the Hopkins trade makes no sense. It is easily one of the worst trades in NFL history, and this kind of adds on to it, because, also you gotta imagine, this is a wide receiver deep draft. If you need a wide receiver, just draft a wide receiver instead of getting Brandon Cooks on a terrible contract. And then also Randall Cobb, which I think Randall Cobb's contract's fine, but it doesn't make sense. But if you want to look at the glass half full perspective, Cooks is only 26, gives Deshaun Watson a deep threat, and if he can get back to his 2018 form, his $8 million salary will look perfectly reasonable. But the decision-making process for the Texans has been suspect all offseason. We don't really know. They could have sat tight, drafted a wide receiver with the 57th overall pick. That player would have been cost-controlled contract, roughly $1.2 million, instead of Houston paying Cooks $8 million. After trading Hopkins, they gave 30-year-old slot receiver Randall Cobb a 3-year, $27 million contract. That was 1 year after Cobb's best option on the open market was a 1-year, $5 million deal. So the hardest part in 2017 when they landed the franchise quarterback, and the Texans figure out the hardest part in 2017 when they got Deshaun Watson. Now they are working on the building around him part. That is apparently the difficult part for Bill O'Brien. And honestly, unless the Texans go on and win the Super Bowl this year, you can't convince me that Bill O'Brien is a smart GM. And I think even if they win the Super Bowl, it would be a fluke. Like, there's no way. Because the Colts have Phillip Rivers now. I think the Colts are going to win that division handily now. I just don't. I just can't handle it, man. Bill O'Brien baffles me every freaking time. Every deal, he baffles me. When we return, we'll talk about MLB. They proposed a new realignment just for this year. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Major League Baseball, man, they're trying to figure out something. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to get a season, some semblance of a baseball season going, but it's not happening so far. They do. So we discussed that they wanted to do a whole season in Arizona, locking every team in the state of Arizona and just, forcing them out in that terrible, terrible heat, which I guess would kill the virus. I don't know. But you have that, and then all of this is crazy. But now we have a new radical plan. This was proposed. This is not official. But a new radical plan that will eliminate the traditional American and National Leagues for 2020. So a high-ranking official told USA Today Sports that they want to realign all 6 divisions for an abbreviated season. So the official spoke on the condition of anonymity because the proposal is one of the several being discussed. So, I mean, this is not the only proposal they're discussing. It's just one of the more interesting ones, in my opinion. So, the plan. Here's the plan, Stan. The plan would have all 30 teams returning to their spring training sites in either Florida or Arizona. As you know, half the league goes to Florida, half the league goes to Arizona. That's how the spring training works. They play the regular season games only in those 2 states and without fans in an effort to reduce travel and minimize risk in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. The divisions would then be realigned based on the geography of their spring training homes. So this plan would allow teams to return to the comforts of their spring training sites for 3 weeks of training, which also include exhibition games before opening the regular season. I dropped my pen cap. Hold on. But before opening the regular season, playing a schedule with wholly different divisional opponents. So here, let's take a look at this realignment structure real quick. So we have the Grapefruit League, which that is in Florida. Then you have the Cactus League, which is in Arizona. You can tell because Cactus, Arizona. So the North division of the Grapefruit League would have the Yankees, Phillies, Toronto Blue Jays, Detroit Tigers, and Pittsburgh Pirates. And by the way, I'm going to try to predict a winner if they actually do play in these divisions. The South would have Boston Red Sox, Minnesota Twins, Atlanta Braves, Tampa Bay Rays, and the Baltimore Orioles. The East would have the Nationals, Astros, the Mets, St. Louis Cardinals, and Miami Marlins. The Cactus League will have the Cubs. The Cactus League Northeast would have the Cubs, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, and the Athletics. The West would have the Dodgers, Chicago White Sox, Cincinnati Reds, Cleveland Indians, Los Angeles Angels. The Northwest would be the Milwaukee Brewers, San Diego Padres, Seattle Mariners, Texas Rangers, and Kansas City Royals. So Hall of Fame manager Tony La Russa said, when you're trying to get really creative, why say no now? He is the Angels' senior advisor of baseball operations. But you have a unique season. Got no problem with that. I'm not sure we'll be able to play in our own cities across the country, so if you split it up like that, it's a possibility. So the Cactus League provides more flexibility given all the teams are within an hour's drive of each other. Also, Florida, with teams spread throughout the state, presents a bigger challenge if players, officials, and support staff would needed to be quarantined, which has not yet been determined. So earlier this week, following a report by ESPN, MLB said it would have preliminary discussions about playing the season exclusively in Arizona. The Arizona-Florida plan has several advantages, including allowing teams to establish home bases with facilities they are familiar with. There would be 26 ballparks available to be used, including 3 Major League Dome stadiums with Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Marlins Park, and Chase Field in Phoenix. Financially, it would be huge. It would be great for TV rights holders. You could have a captive TV audience the entire day. Games in Florida would begin at 11 a.m. and still have primetime games for East Coast teams and their fans. The time slots would permit West Coast teams to play primetime games in Arizona. Baseball, even with the realignment, could still play 12 games apiece against their new divisional opponents and 6 games apiece against other teams in the state. There will be at least one doubleheader a night when all teams are scheduled to play because of the odd number of teams in each state. The DH would likely be universally implemented as well, which I won't get into that. I feel like that's just they're going to just keep that in there. There could be divisional winners and wild card winners, perhaps adding 2 more wild card teams to each league, or a postseason tournament including all 30 teams, which would be insane. The winner of the Cactus League in Arizona would play the winner of the Grapefruit League in Florida for the World Series championship, utilizing the Dome stadiums in late November. The official cautioned that nothing has been decided. They will continue to wait until advised by health and government officials. Yet for now, they'll continue to explore all options, knowing that anything and everything is possible. So let's look at these divisions, and let's kind of just make a quick prediction. Who would win these divisions? So I think an interesting one is the Grapefruit League South. Now you have the Twins, the Braves, and the Rays. The Twins are going all out this year. They made huge acquisitions in the offseason. So the Twins are going all out this season. The Braves, a little quieter, but they're just they're trying to build onto their success from last year. So the Braves could be a huge one. The Rays are also building onto the success they had the past year as well. The Boston Red Sox, they've traded Mookie Betts. They're not expected to be that good. And then you have the Orioles, which the Orioles are the Orioles. So the Grapefruit League South would be interesting. Another interesting one is the Grapefruit League East, which is the Nationals, Astros, Mets, Cardinals, and Marlins. I think the only team out of that bunch that has no chance of competing is the Miami Marlins, but they're already in that. They're already in that situation in their regular division. So let's go off from the top. So you have the Grapefruit League North, the Yankees, Phillies, Blue Jays, Tigers, Pirates. So I really think this is between the Yankees and the Phillies. I think the Yankees will probably pull ahead there. I think the Yankees are just generally built better than the Phillies. But the Phillies, they had Bryce Harper. They kind of built on their team a little bit there. But they got a new manager. But I just, for some reason, I just can't choose the Phillies. So I think the Yankees will win that. The South is literally going to be between the Twins and the Braves. I think the Twins will probably pull that one out. Then you have the East. Nationals still looking good. The Mets looking good. The Cardinals could sneak in there. And the Astros, still a very good team, despite, everything that happened with them. So that's just going to be an interesting one. I think the Cardinals will actually probably pull it out because the Cardinals are looking pretty solid at the moment. Go on to the Cactus League. We have the Northeast, which is the Chicago Cubs, San Francisco Giants, Arizona Diamondbacks, Rockies, and Athletics. So I think this is a bad division. I think, Oakland probably has a good chance of winning this one. The Cubs have a decent chance. They're not terrible. They had a pretty down year last year. The Diamondbacks also, I guess, have a chance, but other than that, that's not a good division. The West, you have the Dodgers, White Sox, Reds, Indians, and Angels. Sorry, scratch everything I said. The West is an interesting one because the Dodgers are the Dodgers. They got Mookie Betts. The White Sox really piled it on this offseason to get more players, and now they are up there. Now the Reds also looking like a solid team. The Indians, the Angels also looking like a really good team there. So the Cactus League West would also be an interesting league to look out for. I think the Dodgers will pull it out of that one just because it's the Dodgers. And then the Northwest, you have the Brewers, Padres, Mariners, Rangers, and Royals. That one, you obviously Padres, I think, is between the Padres and the Brewers. The other three don't really speak out to me as guys who have a chance at, winning. So it's fine. But there you have it. This is an interesting concept. I don't hate it. It makes sense logistically. It makes sense for travel-wise and stuff like that. It makes sense logistically. It's just a very interesting concept that, we've never seen before, and it's going to be very interesting how everything how they handle all of that. So, I like it. I personally like it. I think most of these divisions seem like they would be very competitive, actually. So, because we spread out all the bad teams, but it looks fairly competitive. I don't know about they got to deal with all the other rules, and I don't know how the quarantine thing is going to work. But it looks like a solid play. I give it a thumbs up, I guess. I don't know. When we return, we'll talk about the MLB Show Players Tournament. And as esports try to get more into the mainstream, here. We'll talk about that when we return.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So we talked about it with NBA 2K. The NBA 2K is they did a players tournament. They're doing it right now, I think, or they did it this past weekend. It's interesting to say the least. But I can look up the results right this second, mostly because I just saw a link to it. So NBA 2K, they're having their games broadcasted on ESPN. So good for them. They have a full TV schedule, stuff like that. For instance, this ended yesterday. So they had the preview show April 3rd. They had Jones versus Durant April 3rd. Then they had the first round, all that stuff. I haven't really heard anything from it. I've seen some people on Twitter talk about it, say they watched it a little bit, but it was boring. The players didn't really add anything to it. But now MLB The Show, Major League Baseball, is dipping their toes into this as well, into the esports world. They kind of did a little bit last month. They had a 4-player mini tournament on MLB The Show 20, and I think that's when the game came out. But that was just a hint of what was come with the actual baseball world at hold. They decided that a full esports season of MLB The Show will be played by 30 major league players, each representing his own team. So let's get into it. What does this mean? So, the regular season of this MLB The Show 20 Players League would be round robin. Every team will play every other team one time for a total of 29 games. 3 innings per game, to keep it nice and short, per team in the regular season. The regular season opens April 10th, which was Friday, and is scheduled to end April 28th. The first regular season game, which was 9 p.m. Friday, I guess I could look it up, but I don't know, would be Blake Snell versus Amir Garrett. Blake Snell for the Tampa Bay Rays, Amir Garrett for the Reds. This is a rematch of the title game of that 4-player mini tournament. And then the playoffs, how they'll work is top 8 teams will make the playoffs, which will start shortly after the regular season ends, and largely mirror the MLB playoffs. The first 2 rounds are best of 3. The World Series is best of 5. So let's look at the contestants here. This is, like I said, all 30 teams have a representative. So the Diamondbacks, they have John Duplantier. The Braves have Luke Jackson. The Orioles, Dwight Smith Jr. Red Sox, Eduardo Rodriguez. Cubs, Ian Happ. White Sox, Lucas Giolito. Reds, Amir Garrett. Indians, Carlos Santana. Rockies, David Dahl. Tigers, Nico Goodrum. Astros, Lance McCullers Jr. Royals, Brett Phillips. Angels, Ty Buttery. Dodgers have Gavin Lux. Marlins have Ryan Stanek. Brewers have Josh Hader. Twins have Trevor May. Mets have Jeff McNeil. Yankees have Tommy Canal. Athletics have Jesus Luzardo. Phillies have Rhys Hoskins. Pirates have Cole Tucker. Padres have Fernando Tatis Jr. Giants have Hunter Pence. All right. Mariners have Carl Edwards Jr. Cardinals have Matt Carpenter. Rays have Blake Snell. Rangers have Joey Gallo. Blue Jays have Bo Bichette. And then Nationals have Juan Soto. This is all hosted by Robert Flores of the MLB Network. He'll provide commentary, recaps, analysis, and conduct player interviews throughout the course of the season, including before, during, and after games via MLB Network, and PlayStation social media platforms. So they're streaming this whole thing. There will also be charitable donations to the Boys and Girls Club of America / Canada. Major League Baseball, the MLB, PA, SIE will donate $5,000 on behalf of each participating player to a boy and girl club affiliated with their team's community. The stakes for the competition are enhanced with the championship player earning an additional $25,000 donation for the boys and girls club in their community. So, I mean, this is a good way to kind of try to get content out there. We've discussed it before. Esports is trying to kind of take over because this is the perfect time for them to take over. Because esports, you can have it over the internet, and everybody's at home, got nothing to do, so might as well make the players like play video games. I guess they're playing video games already, so might as well make them play more, I suppose. But with the MLB, with the NBA tournament, there wasn't a lot of buzz about it. I didn't hear much about it. I think, I mean, I guess I could have just done more research, I suppose. But I haven't heard anything about it. I've looked on Twitter. I haven't seen anything about it. I've just seen Masters stuff this whole week and stuff like that. So I just haven't really seen anything about the NBA tournament. Now, MLB, and they actually had big stars like Kevin Durant. But the issue with Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant's kind of quiet. He's not that outspoken, especially on camera, so he wasn't very interested. And that's kind of my issue with this MLB The Show. You have a lot of players that you've never really heard of. I mean, you probably heard of them if you've watched baseball and you're a huge baseball guy. You've probably heard of these guys. But if you're just a casual viewer, a casual baseball viewer who only watches your team, you've probably only heard of one guy. One or a couple guys. I mean, like I said, Hunter Pence is on there. Hunter Pence is a good one to watch. I mean, but other than that, not really much star power here, unfortunately. But I still think it's going to be... I mean, it's interesting to at least do it. And, by the way, Joey Gallo goes 4-0 in opening night of MLB The Show Players League, defeating Trevor May, Lance McCullers, Blake Snell, and Amir Garrett. So Joey Gallo having a huge, start there. And that was this past night. I wonder if they have a standings. Do they? I don't know, but they streamed it all on Twitter. That's what I'm seeing here. I'm on the MLB Twitter right now. They streamed most of the games on Twitter, which is probably smart on their part. I am wondering, is there like a standings? Can I find a standings? Is there a standings that I can look up? That'd be great. I might have to go to like the MLB website. But like I said, it's an interesting concept. Esports is trying to sneak in here and be the new top dog, but it's just not going to happen because there's just not. I found the standings, so let's go over the standings real quick. Not a lot of people have played. It looks like only 4 people have played so far, and they just did a round-robin type deal. So Blake Snell is 2-2, Eduardo Rodriguez is 0-4, Joey Gallo is 4-0, Lance McCullers is 2-2, Trevor May is 1-3, and Amir Garrett is 3-1. So there you have it. No one in the NL East or the NL West have played a single game yet. I mean, I don't know. Let me know what you think. I mean, are you interested in this? I mean, I guess there's some team pride. There's some charitable actions going on as well. So, I mean, there's some reasons to actually care about this. But at the end of the day, it's just something to put on TV. It's something to put on TV, something to get people to keep the interest into baseball because, this time of the year is always baseball. Well, right now it's the Masters, but this time of year is usually baseball. People care about baseball this much this time of year, and unfortunately baseball is gone, so I mean, we can't really do anything about that. So they're kind of trying to fill that void here, and I just don't know if it's working because I feel like most people who watch baseball also, this is a huge point. Most people who watch baseball are old or older. They're an older crowd. I think the average age of a baseball fan is in the 50s. So I don't think it's the best. But also, baseball's trying to get a younger audience. I'm literally just thinking out loud right now. But baseball is also trying to get a younger audience. This could be a good way to get a younger audience, especially if they stream on Twitch and stuff like that. I just don't know. I'm going to watch it, at least for a little bit, just to see if it's a little better when it comes to the players' chemistry and how they are on camera and stuff like that. It's just an interesting concept. I mean, NBA did it. I'm sure Madden will do it as well. I think Madden already did Madden did like a small Madden tournament and something like that. Yeah. It's pretty much all I can say about that. I mean, there's nothing really else to talk about with the MLB thing. But when we return, we'll talk about movies 49 through 40. We're heading down to the end of the movie list of the Athletics Top 100 Sports Movies. We'll talk about movies 49 through 40 here in a little bit. Let me know what you think about the MLB Show Tournament, and we'll talk about the movies when we return.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, folks, here we are. We are in movies 49 through 40. We finished the bottom 50. We are now into the top 50 sports movies according to the fantastic staff at The Athletic. And we ended off on Uncut Gems, which is a newer movie, which I still need to see, which I might actually watch later today. But let's get into it. Let's get straight into it. We're going number 49 with Foxcatcher. It's a 2014 movie, average rating of 80.21. Foxcatcher is one of those special movies where there is a mood of tension right from the start. Hunched-over mannerisms of Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo, so accurately portraying Olympic wrestlers with those gigantic rounded backs and T-Rex arms. Steve Carell turns in a painful and haunting performance as John DuPont of the DuPont family. That would seem absurd if the whole thing wasn't based on a true story, simply a great drama that happens to center on sports. So, I have not seen this movie in particular, but I have seen the 30 for 30 about the Foxcatcher wrestling school and stuff like that, and it's insane. That first off, if you haven't seen that, either watch this movie or watch the 30 for 30. The whole situation is just crazy. This old guy, the old rich guy who wanted to win Olympic medals, basically bought Olympic wrestlers to live on his estate, and then something about guns, and it's insane. It's an insane story about an insane personality, and it revolves around Olympic wrestling, and it's a crazy story. So if you haven't seen the 30 for 30 yet, highly recommend watching it. Actually, it's either a 30 for 30 or an HBO thing, but there's a documentary out there about it. I highly suggest you watch it. Number 48, He Got Game, 1998. Featuring Spike Lee, Denzel Washington, Public Enemy, Jim Brown, Ray Allen holding his own. What more do you need other than a better choice for an accompanying soundtrack for a movie about a seedy underbelly of the recruiting game? Allen gives a raw and unflinching depiction of a young star in the crosshairs of big-time college athletics, money-hungry agents, and all the pitfalls that come with overwhelming talent. Denzel Washington is remarkable as Jake Shuttlesworth, and you can feel Lee preaching from the director's chair throughout. So I have not watched this. It's a Spike Lee joint. I like Spike Lee movies. I will say that I like Spike Lee as a director. I have not seen this movie because I've recently gotten into Spike Lee. So I need to check this movie out. Obviously, I need to check 80% of these movies out. But Denzel Washington, Ray Allen apparently being a decent actor in it as well. So that's probably a must see for me. So 47, Everybody Wants Some, 2016. It's an average rating of 80.33. Spiritual cousin of Dazed and Confused. If you want a movie with a big game at the end, this ain't it. But if you want to watch Finn and Willoughby and Jake and Roper and Plummer and the rest of the 1980 college baseball team go to parties, meet girls, and have a great time, this movie is so damn good. That's Hugh Kellenberger, college basketball executive editor for The Athletic. I don't know what this is. I've never heard of it. It's got a very high rating, though. Yeah, I've never heard of this movie. It's a comedy, apparently. Never heard of this. So, leave it at that. Never heard of it. 46, The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, 1976, average rating of 80.54. In the 80s, there were a couple of movies that seemed to be on HBO all the time, classics like Mr. Mom and Midnight Madness, but the baseball movie that would be on and I'd watch was this one. Before he was Lando Calrissian, Billy D. Williams was Bingo Long, although in my young head he was Lando first, and then I found out about Bingo Long. But both shared the charisma, and Williams oozed. Williams was a perfect fit for Satchel Paige-like character, while Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, is a Josh Gibson type, and the heart of the film. Much like its subject matter, this film doesn't get the attention that some of its more mainstream counterparts receive, but its place among the baseball movies shouldn't be forgotten. So I've never heard of this one either. But looking at just looking at pictures of it right now, it looks fun. It looks like a fun movie to watch. It's got Billy D. Williams, it's got James Earl Jones, Richard Pryor's in it as well. So it's probably a pretty good movie. It's a comedy. Never heard of it still. So number 45, North Dallas 40, 1979, average rating of 80.57. Vic Tafur, Las Vegas Raiders beat writer, says he was 9 or 10 when he first saw North Dallas 40 with his dad. A lot of the film's message that players were disposable parts in a huge machine that spits out money was over my head at that point, but I really enjoyed the behind-the-scenes look at a pro team, from inside the huddle to the locker room to the parties to the breakfast of champions, a Budweiser and pain pills. Nick Nolte and Mac Davis as the broken-down receiver and his quarterback were great, carrying the movie through some uneven parts. It was funny. My dad quoted Davis for weeks and had heart. And even in later viewings, I always enjoyed the non-storybook ending. Man, I feel bad because I keep saying this. Never heard of it. I feel bad that I have to keep saying that, but I've never heard of this movie. It sounds interesting, though. I can't really say anything about something I've never heard of. So, this is going to be a quick rundown of all these, because I have never heard of most of these movies on this 10. But number 44, The Damned United, 2009, average rating of 81.14. Imagine a headstrong air raid coach taking over a college football program that loves to run the ball. That was Brown Clough at Leeds United. The Damned United focuses on Clough's tumultuous tenure, which lasted only 44 days. Michael Sheen is a tour de force, portraying an arrogant, stubborn Clough, hell-bent on making a championship side play his way. It didn't work, but the movie did as a window into life at the top English football in the mid-70s. Hey, guess what? Never heard of it. But Tom Hooper, good director. It's about soccer. I'll probably watch it. Number 43, The Fighter, 2010, average rating of 81.44. There are a lot of boxing movies on our list. Creating real world action is a bit easier in boxing movies, and the energy for intimate narratives just hits harder. Well, The Fighter reaches all those intimate notes and then some. Mark Wahlberg's underrated portrayal of Mickey Ward is somber and heartfelt, but Christian Bale electrifies as his off-kilter brother who battles with demons, give the film an emotional lift there. So, Amy Adams, Melissa Leo has got most of my favorite actors in this. I've seen this movie. It's a great movie. It's got most of my favorite actors in it. Christian Bale, Amy Adams, stuff like that. It's a good movie. Mark Wahlberg is pretty good in it. I don't really have much else to say about it, though. Jerry Maguire is number 42, 1996, average rating of 81.45. Mayberry says, it's personal. I used to want to be a sports agent, and Jerry Maguire romanticized that lifestyle better than any other film. It also hit on so many powerful themes: trust, loyalty, love, friendship, flaws, failure, successes, and fresh starts. And from Show Me the Money to You Had Me at Hello. It contained countless memorable quotes. Call it corny, I'll always call it a classic. So Jerry Maguire is also a fantastic movie. It's a classic. That's all I can really mention about it. It's a classic. Tom Cruise in it is pretty great. Like they said, it romanticized sports agents and how all of that works. So, great movie. Number 41, I, Tonya, 2017, which I could have sworn that came out last year, but whatever. Average rating of 81.47. Allison Janney's tour de force performance in this movie as the unyielding, harsh, and domineering stage mom who Tonya Harding is alone worth the recognition. It also earned her an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. But the entire cast was superb in its portrayal of one of the most stunning sports scandals in modern history. Trying to reconcile wildly different versions of the truth, the movie veers between drama and comedy with a fair bit of camp in between. Love this movie because found Harding to be one of the most fascinating sports figures of my childhood, despite being implicated in a horrific attack on her competitor. The plucky firebrand manager managed to win over legions of fans who admire her verve and moxie in a sport where elegance, grace, poise are revered. Harding was a true icon class. Powerful, athletic, brash, unapologetic. She made me a fan of figure skating. Margot Robbie captured the titular character perfectly, and the movie has an excellent reminder of why Harding was both so polarizing and captivating all at once. So, I haven't seen it. I need to see it. We'll stop right there. So, number 40, Bang the Drum Slowly, 1973. Average rating of 81.57. Baseball movie, but it's not. It's a sad movie, but it's not. It's about relationships, in this case teammates, and taking the time to see someone others don't know is there. This is one that makes grown men swallow the lump in the throat. Feels like Brian's song, but it goes its own way, and it's perfect to end off this 10 movies list, this edition of this segment with never heard of it. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you. If you like the podcast, like, rate, and subscribe on wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Strickland_Josh. And don't forget to, to like it. And, you can tweet me and stuff like that. But have a great rest of your Sunday. Have a great Easter. I'll see you on Tuesday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.